welcome to the next generation of warfare, psychological warfare. In modern conflict, the mind is a potent weapon. Discover General Michael T. Flynn's groundbreaking guide, The Citizen's Guide to Fifth Generation Warfare. Unlock tactics, strategies, and the mindset to navigate this cognitive battlefield that we all find ourselves in. Equip yourself against manipulation and emerge unscathed. Unleash your potential. Order now.
GeneralFlynn.com/alpha. How's it going, everybody? This is the Alpha Warrior Show. I'm your host, Alpha. As always, thanks to the blessings of God, another amazing guest, Awakened Outlaw. And for those of you that know who he is, I know that you're like, oh, hell yeah. And for those of you that don't, you're like, well, stand by, because you're going to have another person that you're going to be following so you can know what's going on. And it should be a fun conversation. There's some topics we're going to cover that aren't so fun. But nonetheless, hopefully we give you guys some information you can take away, go down some rabbit holes, and help raise the global conscience or flat conscience, whatever you subscribe to. But first, streaming ain't free. Alpha's got to survive. So let me get to two quick sponsors, you guys. Goldco, digital dollar. Listen up. Right now, it looks like the government's pushing for this digital dollar, which could mean every penny you spend could be tracked and controlled by the government. Sorry. If that's true, then your entire life could depend on people you don't know, like, or even trust, like the government. That's why smart Americans are opting out and putting some of their savings into real gold and silver. So to help, you can go to alphalexgold.com to get your free 2024 gold IRA kit from my partners at Goldco. It shows you how to protect your hard-earned money with physical gold and silver, even if it's still in a retirement account. And as an American citizen, you could score up to $10,000 in free silver just for safeguarding your savings. At the very least, arm yourself with the knowledge about your options here. Don't be the sheeple. Go to alphalexgold.com now to get your free 2024 gold IRA kit now. Information never hurt anybody, you guys. And then our last sponsor, and we're commercial free to the end of this, America's favorite mustache. And I'll be back in 60 seconds with my guest.
My Towels solved a problem that we've all had with towels. You go into the stores and they feel lotiony and soft, but then you get them home and they wind dry you. That's why I made My Towels. They actually work, they're soft, and they absorb. And now I'm excited to announce two brand new lines of My Towels. What makes them the best towels ever is they're now made with 100% long staple Shapir cotton. This is a combed ring spun cotton that makes My Towels even softer and more absorbent than ever. And now you get a 6-piece set for an amazing introductory sale price as low as $29.98. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get My Towels for only $29.98. Or you can get my designer premium line for just $20 more. Either way, you save 50% now on all My Towels. They actually work. What a concept. This offer won't last long, so please order now.
MyPillow.com.
That's mypillow.com or my store. Everybody always forgets about my store. That's where Mike got coffee and all kinds of other goodies, neck pillows, all the fun stuff. Support Mike. When you support him, you support me and all the other content creators that he's gone behind. Let me bring up the guests you guys want to hear from tonight. Awaken, how you doing, brother?
Oh, hey, good morning. Thanks for having me.
No, absolutely, man. Before we get into the conversation, for my own curiosity's sake, and I'm sure the audience wants to know, how did you kind of get into this, man? How did it unravel?
Yeah, your words are far too kind earlier, but I appreciate it. I don't really know. I hearken back to 2017. I somehow ended up following FBI and Mega Anon, and then things kicked off, and I was out of town a couple of days, so I came back on November 2nd, and I missed the first 4 days of craziness, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? And turns out that then Q-Team started dropping posts, and like most people, I was swept up in it. And that's something that I feel bad that people that have since read posts or caught up kind of to wherever the hell we are. But you know, that intensity of those early days, man, and that was really something. And I think once you see it, you can't unsee it. Doing air quotes, the truth. And I don't know. I've like a lot of people, I've dedicated probably 70 hours a week over the last 6.5 years. It's pretty crazy, but yeah, there was no plan. It just unfolded organically.
And I think that's the best way, because when something's organic, people can see that it's sincere. People can see that it's authentic. And that's important to people, especially right now when it's like, man, everybody's lying. There's all kinds of psychological operations going on, misinformation, disinformation. So when people can find someone that they resonate with, I think that's real important to the movement.
Sure.
and getting people educated right now.
Yeah, it works both ways, right? I mean, I don't have any idea why I resonate with people, but other people resonate with me, and we just all as humans gravitate toward people that we like more than people we don't like. And we're not one monolithic block as humans, obviously, right? So even within the truther community or the America First MAGA community, we're obviously not all the same. And which actually I wanted to touch on base on that, because it kind of ties into the beginning of your show. One of the things that disappoints me, if you don't mind me jumping on this.
No, absolutely, bro. Roll with
Yeah,
it.
well, we're capitalists, right? And so I think sometimes you're talking about psychological operations, and by the way, those are just right. It's a battle of narratives, right? So trying to convince you to drink Coke and not Pepsi, or vice versa. They're running their narratives. It's like this idea that there aren't psychological operations going on around us our whole lives, and in fact, there have been a bunch of bad ones. But one of them is to attack who we are as Americans. And one of those things is to shame people. So oftentimes I think ahead about what the interest is. And the interest to shame people into this idea of, because patriots, P-A-Y-T, you know what I mean, versus patriots, meaning that what your intentions are matters, right? There's always going to be snake oil salesmen. There always has been. But that doesn't mean patriots themselves are doing the same thing, because people do have to support one another. We like to buy in America. We want to support people around us. These are good things, right? This is how you build a healthy society. Interests that don't want us to succeed want us to turn on each other, right? Expectations that, somebody doesn't even have to sell or buy anything. But what they don't have to do is bust on other people that are, especially when it's all willing, right? It's all up front. Everyone is satisfied with it. But our enemies attack it, and they attack the process because it diminishes us and it breaks our ties. And so I'm happy to hear, when people have sponsors. There's nothing wrong with supporting Mike Lindell. In fact, we should support him, right?
I agree.
Or supporting you. And I just applaud people that do that and approach the entire situation that way, because I think it's important that it's okay to be a capitalist. It's okay to be an American, right?
It is. And it's one of those things, and it exists everywhere, but man, it really, we need to teach ourselves how to handle this, especially in the conservative arena. We go to extremes, and I'm not talking extremes like the left points it. It's, when we label people, as patriots, and, anybody that wants to have a sponsor or write a book or whatever the case may be. And
Right.
we go from one end of the rope. You think of a boxing ring, you go from one end of the ropes to the other end of the ropes.
Right.
The coach always tells you, stay off the
Right.
ropes. And it's just like, we have to understand, your discernment. It's a word that's been around for a few years now. It's really hit the limelight. But trust your discernment. Look at people's actions, and I'm curious, you don't have to say specifically names, but I know that there's people that like constantly tell me, don't talk to this person, don't work with this person, all this bad. And I'm like, look, that's fine if you feel that way, but
Right.
I want to have a conversation with them. And then I'm going to decide how I feel about them, because I understand that two people cannot get along. Doesn't mean I'm not.
Right.
And it's just, I think yes, do we have to be careful with information that we bring in front of our audiences because there's a responsibility? Absolutely. I understand that. But we also have to make sure we do it in such a finesse that we're also not just isolating information that we deem acceptable or information that resonates with us. Sometimes you just got to let people expose themselves.
Yeah, and I think you're exactly right. That word discernment in there. I mean, let's. I mean, it applies anywhere. So what you're seeing is there's always going to be shysters because there are the mega church shysters that you know. And it's up to you to decide if you want to send them money, but that doesn't mean religion is bad, right? That you have to be able to decide even how you believe and what you believe. And so the people that are trying to divide us they try to assert that other people are gatekeepers. But I would argue that attempts to keep people apart and to cause division are the gatekeepers, right? There's a narrative there, and they're trying to split. And so they come from different angles, and there's different people involved. And obviously, the media. I see some of the people online as an extension of the fake news media, where instead of just being commercials, things, they can actually interact. And so, if you were, and this is a question you ask yourself, think about if you were the deep state, right? What would you do? I mean, how many times were we told division is going to be something employed against us, right?
100%.
And yeah, and I just think there's a responsibility in there, discernment. You have to decide. I mean, it's really no different than your regular life, right?
It is. And I'll tell you what, you made the statement right now. Imagine if you were the deep state. I have awakened, like to understand what I'm up against. I know what kind of formal training I've had, through law enforcement and the undercover stuff. And I think if I was the deep state, man, I could really be dangerous because of what I know and how I know to get to a long-term goal by making people, psychological operations. Now, thank God, I'm on the good side. I want eternity in heaven. I want to do the creator's work. But I also am not naive to know that there's people that have the same level of training I do and more that aren't good people. And
right.
I think because I understand like the formal training that is involved there, it even makes it so much more scary to me to know that this exists out there. And I think it keeps my discernment on such a heightened level, knowing that, disinformation, and for those that, you hear the word misinformation and disinformation, and the best way to understand the distinction between the two, misinformation is information that's put out there, but there's no intent behind it. There's no nefarious intent behind it. Disinformation has a nefarious intent. There's a plan. It's deliberate to mislead you. So there's a difference between them. And the disinformation is usually going to be associated with some type of operation or propaganda. And that's scary, dangerous. And I'm telling you, man, when I go to social media Awaken, I'm looking at this stuff and I'm like, all right, there's going to be truth and there's going to be ops. I need to find the two of them and then, do the work to see, where the operations are coming from. What are the long-term goals of this? And man, you've been smack in the middle of this since 2017, because I wasn't, I was not aware of these boards when they came out. I was this happy, go dumb, lucky cop. It's the whole Epstein thing that launched me into these things, and here's the crazy thing, just to put this, in a perspective maybe you haven't seen. You described the intensity of those first 4 days, or even
no. So we understand that was the first 4 days that I missed, and then because October 28th is when the first drop happened, and I was just happened to be out of town for a few days. So no, but yes, the intensity of the entire, I don't know, first 6 months or so was maybe longer.
That's what I'm saying. It's one of those things, because I remember what the moment was like for me when I first came aware of it. And it's like you're jumping on everything you can because you feel like you have 72 hours to save the world, right? I got to reach everybody. But so when you guys were going through this, I'm here in California, clocking in at work, clocking out at work. Never heard of it. Never heard of it. And that's why I try to remind people that there's people like that right now. clocking in at work. Clocking now, granted, it's probably easier to find the information now because we're in such a shit show going on as a nation and a world. But people have to remember, like, we always still have to make sure we present things down to the weakest link in the chain, because there are people that have no clue yet what's going on, and we need them. We need them to know what's going on.
Well, absolutely. And I think to your first part about dis or misinformation, one of the things that really struck me that's very recent, because these things don't always happen overnight, they're spread out. The ivermectin, with the FDA coming out and being like, okay, it's not just horse and cow dewormer. Ivermectin works, right? They knew it the whole time. But Big Pharma doesn't make money off one of the cheapest drugs to ever win it won the Nobel Prize. And so that was misinformation, trying to get people to get vaccinated instead of looking at cheap alternatives that work great. That is evil personified. But anyway, I digress. You were mentioning the early days. So yeah, I mean, the urgency of it all, I think, is exactly right. It was like a movie, right? You have to disarm the bomb and it's counting down, and we were just hanging on each drop, and simultaneously trying to figure out if this was real, right? Is this BS? Is it just another LARP, live action role play, right? And we didn't know, but the information was so compelling. I will tell you, retrospectively, we can think about what if we were the deep state, but what if we were the Patriots? We had to unroll this without giving away the plan, right? Because the enemies can see it. The enemy sees everything we post. So they couldn't, especially the calendar. I think of used to be involved with like software builds, right? So you get the calendar out. It applies to home building as well, which is probably more common. You can't, if the guy putting in the plumbing is sick, it's the flu, right? You can't, and the electrician, but you can't put the drywall on until the plumbing's in. That guy got delayed by 2 weeks. Well, it put off the drywall. And so little things can happen that snowball that just added 2 months onto your house bill, right? So one, it's amazing that we're on schedule 6.5 years later, but they couldn't give us the calendar. And so the calendar of events are the things that have to happen. And we didn't know about a 1-year delta, and that, for people that may or may not know, that's just the 1 year later. You can look at something that was posted on that day to see if it was like they were basically, calling their shot before they shot it, and then hitting it. And they've done that so many times, it's ridiculous. But we don't know what a 1 year. We didn't know about a 2-year delta until 2 years went by. 3, 4, 5, 6. One of the downsides, and this is what the White Hats would have known, is that people would mistakenly tell other people that, Hillary Clinton's going to be arrested, things on those days, because you can't know what you don't know.
Right.
And that the White Hats would have had to know that, but weighed that against the alternative of not going about the plan the way they have. And I think you're right, back to the point about training. I mean, the people that I believe are running this has been long planned. I believe this specific effort that we're going through now was probably set in motion after JFK was killed. And it just takes that long, have people, because it makes sense when we're talking about the deep state too. I mean, I think it's really important to think about their level of expertise. Now, I don't believe they ever thought they'd lose control. And I'm guessing we've tried many times and learned a lot of lessons along the way. But they have been deliberative. If you have enough time, the will, the money, and the power, which they have accumulated all that because we didn't see them coming they've been around a long time, entrenched themselves, and they there's basically nothing that I've come across that they haven't infected, right? Corporations, businesses, NGOs, countries, states, right? Everything that can be corrupted has been corrupted.
Yep.
And I look at it like a criminal enterprise, right? Like the largest mob ever. And the same things, they have the guys go around for protection money, basically. But on the grandest scale, to the point where people don't even know they're paying, because that's the question. Why do we pay income tax if Treasury can just print money and assign it value, right? We're paying the VIG, right? We're paying to exist. They're just taking, they're printing money all they want and leaving us with the bill, and then taking, 40, 50% of our income when you add everything together. It's slavery.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I had that conversation with a buddy the other day because he was pretty pissed about something, and rightfully so. And I was like, I mean, it was a very deep conversation, but this particular part of it was, if the government came and just took 60% of your wages, no, we wouldn't be having it. America would be grabbing pitchforks and torches. However, they take 30% of what you make, and then they take 30% of what your spouse makes. Right. So they are still taking 60% of your family's income. They just do it in a way that you can kind of absorb it, and you just doesn't click for whatever reason, because we're used to this debt slavery that they've put us in. I mean, the system is this, I mean, as evil as it is, I mean, they did it well. And that's the scary part.
Right. They nickel and dime us on top of absconding with their money. They tax you on the money you earn, right? And then they tax you on things that you buy, especially once you tax something and you paid a tax on it. I don't understand why people pay a tax on like a home that's been resold once the tax has been paid on it. But if you want to sell lemonade, that's how ridiculous. We've all seen the lemonade stands. But why does the government need to give you a license to sell for a little kid to sell lemonade on the corner? It's so ridiculous. But it's all intentional.
The one that always got me was, why are we taxing our veterans when we're paying them with taxpayer money? Like that's
an excellent point. Yeah, that's exactly. And it's a really good point. To me, nothing made sense in this world, right? For example, I've never understood how we spend the most per pupil and get the worst results via our public education system, right? Like, that doesn't make any sense. One day it occurred to me, it's all intentional. And then the clouds cleared and it was like, not necessarily in a good way, but the truth. Once you understand that the entire system, Fyodor Dostoevsky famously quipped that, I'm paraphrasing, but the best prison is the one that someone doesn't know they're in.
Wow.
And I think that's incredibly prescient of him to have pointed that out. And unfortunately, that's where we live. And to make it even worse, because people don't know they're in a prison, the people that do sound like crazy people.
I'll share a quick story with you, man.
Yeah.
I'd only been a cop maybe just a few years, man. I mean, I was still wet behind the ears, still trying to make sure I knew how to put a gun in a holster. Like, I was new, right? And I get sent to this lady's house, and she says that, there's people looking at her. So I'm thinking I'm going to some type of like peeping Tom like type of call, right? Mm-hmm. And then I get there, and she's just like, well, turn off your radio and all this. I'm like, the hell no, I'm not turning off my radio. Like, why are you being weird? And so anyways, I go into this lady's home, and I'm not exaggerating. She has foil around the TV, foil on the windows. She has foil on the air conditioning vents, but with holes still put in it. Long story short, this lady's telling me how the government's been doing tests on her, how she's been being monitored, and how they can send these microwaves through the window. And you got to remember, I have no clue. My little brother is a conspiracy guy. I've always been the opposite. So I'm just like, you are nuts, is what I'm thinking, right?
Right.
And she's just like, they can hear what we're saying right now. That's why you had to turn off your radio. I'm like, well, I can't for safety reasons. long story short, I heard the lady out, because we write those calls off, unfortunately, as 5149. We would just call them, one number away from a 5150 or a crazy person. And now I look back and I'm like, what if she was telling the truth?
Right.
What if this was an MK Ultra victim? What if I would have asked the right questions? Hey, have you ever worked for the government? Have you had a spouse that's in the government? Have you ever been hindsight's always 2020, but it's like knowing everything I know, like you said, once you ring that bell, and it's like, man, what could I have learned then? And then how far along in the process would I be of my awakening if I just wouldn't have wrote the person off as crazy?
Yeah, she, and she could have been crazy. And I think that's really important. Yeah, the people that when the term conspiracy theorist is used as a pejorative, because to make people sound crazy. So the closer they get to the truth, if other people perceive them crazy, then the people protecting that truth, that's part of the intentional defense mechanism, right? And so they made it this name to dismiss. Now, and this is extremely important that I like to talk to people that are relatively new, is that not every conspiracy is true, right? Let's just get that out up front, right? Just because you see some things that aren't right doesn't mean you buy into every conspiracy theory yourself, right? And I think that, people that don't know what's going on, they would think there's some kind of monolithic block of crazy people, because that's the narrative, the psyop that's been sold to the public, right? And so, if not every conspiracy is true, a simple application of logic and history, because conspiracies are rather the norm and not the exception throughout history, that not all conspiracies are false. So if we can come to that understanding, then I think you have those conversations, and I get what you mean as far as like, if you would have asked the right questions, and I could have woken up earlier. Same with me. I had friends that were telling me 9/11 was a self-inflicted wound and all these things for a number of years, and they're my friends, and I'm like, all right, whatever, man. It's like, I voted for Bush. I had no idea, right? I was inculcated into that, and that was my norm and my blinders on. Anything outside of that, 9/11, for example, you had to then question, our government is actually evil, does evil things. That was a huge sacrifice. It was like Pearl Harbor was also done that way, I believe, to get us into war. And if you look back, you can see the patterns, and conspiracy theorists are at heart pattern recognitionists. Right? And if you see something happen, you see the patterns, and you alert other people. I love to use the Truman Show as a great example.
Yeah.
Right now, we're not cool enough to be Truman. No, we're the people walking around in the background in the little town. But even worse, we don't even know that we're actors in the background on the Truman Show. Right? We have like the wool pulled over our eyes in layers. But that's the reality that we're wed to, and I'm talking we as humanity. And it's scary to consider the fact that you live on a TV set or a diorama, right? That all of a sudden it changes everything in your worldview. That's frightening. So people will actually fight to protect the system that's enslaved them. That's just evil.
That's one of the key statements in the movie The Matrix, when he says, the fight to keep the Matrix going.
Yeah. And,
I was gonna say, you segue us into a really good thing that I had mentioned that I wanted to make sure we got into, and it's looking at this history of things and these patterns. And let me bring this up on the screen real quick so people can see, and I'll make it big. Heads up, you guys, for those that don't like violence. It doesn't show so much gore, but it is very violent. It is going to be a clip about just under 20 seconds that's going to show people being murdered. So just want to make sure people have a disclaimer that that's coming down the pipeline. But we have this attack that happens yesterday in Russia, near Moscow, at this theater area where people were gathering. and instantly you start hearing all the different narratives getting pushed. So let me play the clip.
Okay.
There's two of them, and then we'll talk about this. All right. And
Yeah.
let me show the
Wow.
other one now. Because pause it, bring it
It's
up.
tough, but I think it's important not to avert our eyes.
It is. I mean, it's I mean, it's terrible. Let me show the second one real quick. This one's a little bit longer, but here we go.
Паника, паника! Паника, тише! Тише, паника! Спокойно, пожалуйста! Ребят!
All right. So the reason I share these first, or the second one first, that shows kind of the commotion and the chaos, is the one thing that we were always told as cops, and then I train the younger guys under me, is you're always going to get hurt in the scenario you never prepared for. And unfortunately, our southern border's been open for a very long time, and some very bad people have come through it. And everybody can argue what the number is on that, but nonetheless, some bad people have come through. Some people that maybe have the type of training, or maybe even the intentions of something like this. And over the last 12, 16 hours or so, I've seen so many videos, and I just see people that I can tell they were never prepared for. What am I going to do in the event that something terrible happens? And I see people running behind like couches and things that are not going to afford them any safety. It's just, they panic, and then you see these people get killed. And it's like, I try to tell people, listen, don't stick around. Fight to get to the exit. The only safe place is out of the place that you're at when this is going down. Unless, you're one of those people that has some type of mechanism on you to fight back. Then you have to gauge, what are the numbers are. There's a lot that goes into it. But at the very bare minimum, I want people to get it out of your head that people like this are going to have mercy on you first. If they find you, they're going to kill you. So understand that. And then the second thing is, move yourself to a place of safety, and hiding behind a couch or a poster or around a corner is not that. You got to fight to get out, and no pun intended, but you got to fight like your life depends on it, because obviously it does. But to bring us back to this, I mean, what's your initial takes on this, man? I mean, you kind of see what's going on in social media with it.
Yeah, the first thing that struck me kind of bleeds back into what you just mentioned is the Second Amendment, from the standpoint of you don't know when it's going to happen, and you don't know when you're going to have to protect your life. And it would just seem to be a wake up, because I would want that choice. Now, that doesn't mean if I was there and I was carrying, I'd engage, because as you're right, you have to use your discernment, right? If it's 10 guys with machine guns, it may not make sense. But did you see that one lady sitting behind the table? I don't know. I think it was a table. It might've been that couch. Her eyes were wide open, man. Pupils dilated. She was just frozen, and I guess that can happen. But I think, it comes back around to something that police are trained in, and it's situational awareness. And we've all, when you drive and all of a sudden realize that you kind of come to, and you've been driving for like 5 minutes, like on automatic. You're like, what's going on? I mean, we go out in public and we go to the movies. Yeah, we go to the movies. We go out to the mall. We go places, and we're just focused on what we do. But there's all this other stuff going on around us, just on the road to get there, all those other cars. And if you're lost in whatever world you're lost in, you're kind of like at the mercy of other people. And if you think about like predators, if you're in the ocean, you have to be aware there are predators and you are the prey. And I think that we've become, I wouldn't say lazy, but a lot of times most of us live in relatively safe environment. And obviously, not everyone, but you always think, oh, it can't happen here. Can't happen here, and then it does, and everyone's shocked by it. But I would argue that everything has to happen that has to happen somewhere. But as far as my reaction online, once again, it's I'm just amazed. At the incident itself, and then people's reaction to it. I think it's changing. I mean, we have a recognition that it could even be different people than we think it is. I saw an article this morning on Yahoo News, on the news coming out blaming Putin probably did this, and so I'm just like, all right, let's think about this logically. There's no way he can't win. Ukraine lost the war the day that they started.
Yep.
And I don't understand what potential benefit. It's kind of like when they blamed Russia, and I'm not a huge Russia apologist. I'm just calling the shots. When they blew up the Gazprom pipeline, and the question is, who did it? Well, one, Joe Biden admitted, like a week later, he was giving a speech, I think in Berlin or somewhere. He admitted it, but everyone knows that we were involved. But we blamed Russia. But the thing is, that's Russia's pipeline. Like that is a huge economic burden. Why would they self-impose a penalty on themselves to that level? Because selling energy is a huge part of their economy. It doesn't make any sense. But as per education earlier, is once you understand that the people in power, they don't care about the truth, right? It's the narrative. It's the narrative that's important. And even if some of us know, they know that most of the people don't. And they can sell them whatever lie, they can repeat it. And I think a lot more of us are cognizant of that now. You've seen the video where all the different newscasts on the same day all said the same thing.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing where I believe that was white hats. And, however that works, my best guess is we had something called 4 a.m. talking points that was pointed out. And when those came out, it was basically, what was on the agenda as far as what was going to be said or the angles that are taken. And people follow suit. And I think it's likely that white hats got control of that at some point before that and sent out everybody has to read this. And then they did. And this was done as kind of a science experiment that everyone could see. And it takes you aback. If somebody hasn't seen it, it's incredible. It's the same exact lines from hundreds of different TV stations across America from the news personalities. And when you see that, it like breaks the third wall, in a movie,
Yep.
It kind of breaks the third wall, right? Once you see it, the third wall is broken. And there's so many movies that tell us the truth without telling us the truth. In this case, right? The glasses, the guy puts the glasses on and he can see the truth around him that everyone else can't see. And yeah.
It's interesting you say that, Awaken, because like I said, before I was awake to this, before I rang that bell, I had still come to recognize things like, when you're on the side of law enforcement, typically stories, especially in your local area, that are going to get released by the news, you have the insight to like what really happened. And so it's not uncommon, especially since we're all friends with all the different agencies and, the sheriff's departments that are out here. You all know each other. And anytime something big happens, we're all talking. And then you hear the news, give the story, and you're just like, yeah, it didn't go down like that, So
right.
You start to recognize that, the media is going to share what the media shares, but just because you break that third wall of thinking that the media is the place where the knowledge is and they have the answers, because I was part of something where I knew in real time they don't. And then I started to recognize things like, I live out in, the Coachella Valley near Palm Springs, and we're about an hour and a half, 2 hours away from Los Angeles. And I was an early guy, I like to get up early. And when I would watch when my local news came on, because my local news was usually an hour behind, like the metropolitan area news, what I noticed was they were saying the exact same news that I could watch from KTLA.
Mm-hmm.
And, and the only thing that was, personalized to where I lived was the traffic and the weather. But as far as like the headlines, I didn't even have to watch mine. I could just wake up and watch KTLA because this was going to be the same thing my news did. And now, speaking to that part you brought up, where it was hundreds of news broadcasts, you realize, who sends them there? Where's the script coming from? Who answers the fax that says this is what you're going to say today? Where's that fax coming from?
Right. I think it's like the Associated Press. That line, that's a narrative shaping line of news that goes out that they then use. It's really amazing because they think about this from a psychological standpoint. They want to have these morning shows that people connect with. They get important information going back and forth to their jobs so they can earn money for the man, in this case, the globalist cabal, as it rolls downhill, right? But you're listening to the same messages, and it's like different radio stations, and you're going to have people listen to rock or country or give it a name, but the companies are owned by the same people, and they might alter the ads bit to target the demographics, but it's all the same stuff. And then it's little things like, oh, this dog is for adoption and cute and this, and then they always have the goofy guy on the team, and they joke around, but it's so consistent that it's impossible not to be intentional, in my opinion. And that gets back to what we're talking about, breaking that third wall. When you start seeing the circus around you that you weren't aware of before, and other people don't see it. And it's difficult. This is important to me because there's people that we care about in our lives, we love, our friends, and the people that also presumably love and respect your relationship with them, but they won't listen to you when you're trying to tell them your life is in danger. You're surrounded by actual savage beasts, right? You live in a diorama, it's not real. And then they have been trained to shut you down, and by trained, the great example is like the Daily Show. I think was a great turning point for media because it crossed the line between news and it brought it in. So the left killed comedy as it is, but there's one part of comedy that they were able to manage and really manifest, and that's the ability to mock. So you look at Jon Stewart and brings out the news, mocks everyone that's supposed to be mocked, and the crowd all claps. And it's Pavlovian training, like SEALs. And the net result, Don Lemon and Colbert and all these guys, the net result is an entire class of people that all they care about is spiking the football in your face and laughing at you, you dumb, rude, racist, Nazi, homophobe, right? They don't want to talk about the truth because they've been trained to label and dismiss you before you've even said anything. And so when you're talking to people that presumably say, I love you or I respect you, and you're like, you are in danger, and they turn around and protect the world, the illusion that has them enslaved, it's really difficult, because you see through it and you want to help other people. But, in the same way, when you didn't know what you know now, and you can't know what you don't know. And we all wake up whenever we wake up to it. And yes, there's been people that woke up a long time ago in different ways, and there's no competition. Right? I don't mean to drone on this, but I've seen people that have been truthers longer that have wanted people to see what they see. Look at see. As more people see what they see, then there's a hierarchy of I woke up first, right? And that attitude I don't understand, because it's like everyone has an equal ticket to ride on this train, right? One ticket, admit one, and we all get to experience the journey ourselves. And that journey begins with a spark, where you all of a sudden you break free of that trance you're in with the movie, or that trance you're in when you're driving it, and you startled because you comes into focus, right? And so we've all had that. And so sometimes people that then wake up, they don't understand that people still have to have that, right? A lot of people want to talk about it, trying to grow and all this crazy stuff. And then you come across like a crazy person that reinforces their psychological training to mock you and dismiss you, right? And so when you look at it from the cabal side, of course that's what they do, right? It makes it, you can see it now that you're thinking about the audience. Think about all those shows and how the audience all needs to be reinforced that they're all like, I'm on the right side of history. Those brobes, and they clap. And, you know, I don't even think at that level it's about party. Both parties are terrible.
Yep.
I'm not saying that, but you know, you get my point. Is the systems that they put us in. So the training, and then they even pit us against one another, and they, you know, Dems and Republicans, and we know that they're the uniparty. So we think they're on different sides, and they enter in racist things and all because they want us fighting each other, and that way we're not focused on the guys pulling the strings behind the curtain, right? We just never knew there were people behind the curtain.
Yeah, a gentleman shared yesterday. He was talking about a cartoon, and I can't remember it, but it was these two characters, and I want to say it's like a 70s or an 80s cartoon, like a Saturday morning cartoon. But there was these two characters that, in the beginning, it shows them, you know, talking, being friendly, and then they clock in, and then once they clock in and get onto the set, you know, they're trying to kill it. They're trying to kill each other. They're going at each other. Right. And then at the end of the cartoon, they go and, you know, they clock out. You know, they're drinking beers and stuff again.
Was that Spy versus Spy?
No, it wasn't Spy versus Spy, but that's a good one. It was another one. It was a dog, and it was, I can't think of it. And I know I've seen the cartoon. Yeah, at least the reruns of it.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. It's the sheepdog.
Yes. Yes.
It's a Wile E. Coyote sheepdog thing. Yes.
Yes, it is the sheepdog. And I was like, man, what a perfect analogy for what our government is when you look at parties. You know, they put on this facade that we see, and then they're at the after party tapping champagne glasses.
Yep. And so I look no further than our debt, right? I mean, our debt, the debt they tell us about, you know, it's 100 trillion. They just have, you know, 60% of our debt is called unfunded liabilities, which is another name for debt, but they can sell us on the 38 trillion. And even that, it's impossible to catch up with the interest. We've already spent our great grandchildren's money just kicking the can down the road, and it's infuriating. But again, you go back and you think about it, the system isn't broken, right? I'm not a Nassar Jassar. I don't know what's going to happen financially. All I know is you can't fix a system that was built to enslave humanity, right? That keeps us locked down. Yeah.
One of the most important things you've said, because I remember this when I recognized this was a game changer. And it's what you're saying. The system's not failing. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do. And once you recognize that, it just now you have to address it differently once you know that.
Right. But it requires other information. For instance, like, why would they do that? That doesn't make any sense. And it's like, well, you have to understand the people and the motivations behind it. They've told us that they want to reduce the Earth's population to 500 million people. We're not making this up. And you've seen the people at the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab and his gang of idiots. But these guys are actually evil. And when you come to understand that, then all of their things make sense, because they want to bring us to a new world order. And so they've trained everyone to like laugh at anybody that says it, but they actually say it themselves when they manifest it. It's part of their entire, they have to tell you out loud. And if you don't know what they're telling you, they've already told you. It's tacit approval. And that's important to them. But I digress. You know, yes, I couldn't agree more.
There's a clip of Yuval Noah Harari, and he's talking about how they're building this digital. And these are his words. I may not get them exactly. He goes, "We're building a digital ark, and it's not for everybody." And it's like they're telling you, like, we don't have.
Well, we're dealing with legitimate bond level. It's not just people that have competing ideas. I mean, that's what they sell us on. These are bond level James Bond, if not worse, like combinations of to where it's comical. You know, these are evil people. These are the same people that developed COVID and released it on the world, right? It's not what are they capable of. The question is what aren't they capable of? And they're capable of anything. You know, they don't value human life. This is a cult. This is a religion. This is Luciferianism. And you can't fight an animal or an opponent if you don't understand what you're fighting. And if you're denying what you're fighting, right, that it doesn't change the fact that that's a great white shark when you're in the ocean and you're prey, right? You can say that, oh, only so many people in 1,000 get attacked or lightning. I'm like, still like, when you're that person, statistics don't matter, right?
100%. I'm still not walking around with a copper rod near the ocean during a lightning storm.
Exactly. I mean, why would you bring that on? But you know, you were also dealing with people that go to the public beach, to use the metaphor, and chum the water to bring the sharks in, right? Knowingly, and going to the area with the kids' beach. So there's most kids in there, and then bring in the sharks, and that's what we're dealing with. So how, when like there can be no consolation. We cannot negotiate. You cannot negotiate with somebody that's going to kill all the terrorists, no matter what you do. You can't negotiate with somebody that's not coming to the table as an honest broker. You know, you think back to all the treaties that unfortunately our ancestors broke with the Native Americans, and you know, the price, whatever's on the paper, doesn't matter if the other party is just using it to appease, you know what I mean? And they actually have their fingers crossed behind their back, and they're plotting out, you know, how to eliminate you and your family. And so that's why, and I've mentioned this before, why I firmly believe that the lessons that the white hats have learned over time is you cannot appease this kind of enemy that's actually evil, that the only solution is a complete extermination. Because this persistent cancer that's metastasized through humanity, it's been here for a long time, you know, goes back even, you know, Prussia and before that. And if you haven't read Prussia Gate on Substack, I highly recommend it, because it helps pull back the veil on who our enemy is, right? And you know, okay, Nazis, but it predates all of that. You're just seeing different incantations. Right, these are the same people that funded Karl Marx to invent Marxism. Right, he didn't just come out with, you know, out of nowhere. He was paid to live in London and come up with this system. And so all these different systems that they try are all controlled by the same group of people from behind the scenes, and they puppet up a president or something to do their bidding. But you know, the control is there, and it extends so far. It's ludicrous to even think about. Right, because it's as bad as you can imagine times, you know, infinity, right? And that even applies to people like you and I that see it. We don't know how bad it is, and however bad we think it is, you know as well as I do, it's way worse than that.
Yep. That's the part that keeps me up at night, bro. When I'm like, man, this is bad, and then I'm like, and I still don't know how bad this really gets. Like, it's terrifying. Right.
There's levels, right? So, and I won't go into it now, but I that's why I also love Plato's allegory, The Cave, because if you're familiar, you know, the slaves in the cave see the shadows on the wall, and because that's all they've ever seen, they presume the shadows are real, and that's their reality. And if you break free of those chains and get out of the cave and see the whole world, it changes your entire perception. And if you go back in to where the other slaves were and you tell them about the world, they're not going to believe you because the shadows on the wall are real. And currently, those shadows on the wall are put up by the fake news media, largely, and then the masses are focused on what they see on TV, and that becomes reality. And it really is. I mean, the depth and breadth of this, it's breathtaking. And I don't condone anything or back anything they've done. I have to respect the game and not the player, because the game is these people have been absolutely schooling us without our knowledge while we pay them, and they slaughter and rape our children for centuries, right? They're like a class of vampire that feeds off of us, and we're just not aware that this entire cult religion, Luciferian religion is even there. It's so insidious. It's amazing what they've accomplished, and it speaks volumes to how successful they've been, which is why what's happening with the white hats is so amazing, because it should have never happened, right? And we know that if the cabal, as I like to call them, regain control, that the reason we know that they're not in control is they would immediately move to take out Trump, even though they probably tried, take us all offline, shut down any and all opposition, right? Turn off the social media or control them like we were before, where we were kicked off. We're back on X, for example. But they would react violently, right? Why wouldn't they go after content producers on the Patriot MAGA side?
Yep.
Right. Why would they not? And so that it's like deductive reasoning. Occam's razor. The most obvious answer is probably true. And I just see this in the system, and they lost control, and so it's a process to wake everybody up, and that's what we're going through.
And you make a fantastic point right there. And as we're in the fourth quarter of the show too, so and I want to get to some posts you have to get your shotgun thoughts on that. But to this point, because you made it's very important, and I think people need to recognize, you call them wins or at least some positive light. Is there was a period of time where mainstream media was in the lead, and alternative media, podcasters, citizen journalists, anons, all that group was trying to play catch up. And then there was a time when they were both neck and neck, and it's become very obvious people have completely or not completely, but a vast majority of people have shut down mainstream media and turned to alternative media, and alternative media is now in the lead. And the cabal cannot keep up with that information. So of course they would take it down, and they haven't. And like you said, you have to recognize that as at least an indication that there is some wins taking place or some control that's on our side that just needs to resonate with us. Like you have to, like that's Occam's razor. Why would they not take it down? It's because they can't.
Right. Yeah, and I don't think things are as convoluted or crazy or difficult to understand if you just think about it in larger terms, and just realize once you see it, even if you see take a tidbit or two away from our conversation and it hits you. I mean, we have people still that are only reacting to what's happening, and I think whether it's pushed by the cabal or things being coordinated by the white hats, that's, in my opinion, that's not always exactly what's happening, right? I mean, we're not just sending money to Ukraine. We're allowing the corrupt criminal mafia to launder our money, gift themselves money to take us on. And it's as easy as that. And people are like, go for Ukraine. Yeah. And it's like, we've destroyed an entire generation of Ukrainian men, gone. The entire country's leveled, right? And you're cheering for war. These are the people that used to be, like I said, for peace, right? And now the warmongers are the leftists, right? And conservatives are the ones like, why are we don't need to fight in wars? Like, that doesn't make any sense unless you realize that it was always that way. The left changes our social structure, their definition of our social structure in order to fit their ends. And so, when they call left right narrative, and it's like, here's the middle, and it's like, that's not the real political. The real political spectrum is zero government on one side, which is anarchy and unsustainable, and total government on the other side. And a total government is Nazism, socialism, fascism, totalitarianism, all the isms, right? They all want total control. Conservatives want less government. So it doesn't make any sense that we want total control. We're not the Nazis. We're never the fascists. You can see who the fascists are right now as they reveal themselves. But even they have been convinced by the powers that be that we're the fascists. Like Antifa points it out, it's backwards. Everything's upside down, right? And you see it, and you're like, oh my God, it's there. We just, this is the process of helping everybody see that.
You mentioned something right now, Awaken, and this is I'm telling you, that's why I love these conversations when they're not scripted and they're just authentic, because man, God leads the way. But you mentioned something. This has always been one of my highest priority concerns. And in General Flynn's first book, the Fifth Generation Warfare One, Session One, and there's no page numbers, but if you go to Chapter 3, Section 3, so 3-3, it has this section, and it's titled "How to Make People Kill People," and it says, influencing people to kill others happens in 4 phases. Phase 1, polarization. Phase 2, tribalization. Phase 3, dehumanization. Phase 4, the killing. And when you when you were saying right now that people that normally would have never cheered this on and they're cheering it on, that's the part that worries me. That have they accomplished phase 3 of this dehumanization? We've seen the tribalization. I mean, that's been very obvious. But we've seen, the videos. I mean, unfortunately, like the video that I shared at the beginning of this episode, and we see the videos from Palestine and Gaza and Ukraine and other places, and it's just, I see one side. Doesn't matter what side you're on. Doesn't matter. Y'all use Gaza and Israel as an example. Doesn't matter what side you're on. I have seen both sides articulating how the death of an innocent child is okay for their cause. And if you don't recognize that as dehumanization, like that's scary to me, because the next phase is now you've accomplished it to where people are just going to openly start killing each other. And we see the predictive programming and stuff that's out there for that.
Well, look at the transgender issue. So Baphomet, God, they looked, the sacrificing of babies and such, is a transgender. It's male that has breasts, and so this is part of their culture. And so they're pushing this on people, so they convince everybody. All the TV shows, all of a sudden, it was a big deal back in the day. A TV show called Soap, that Billy Crystal played the gay guy. That was a huge deal because he actually played a gay guy on the TV show. Fast forward today, and people are free to do whatever they want. I think most conservatives, there's a line draw, like you can't control other people. But homosexuality has always been around. It's a certain percentage. It's persisted over time. It's objectively there. If it's 2-3% of the population, for whatever the number is, it's pretty low. All of a sudden now it's 30 and 40% of the current young generation, right? Like, how do you go from 2 or 3% to damn near half, right, in just a matter of years? And we're watching this stuff, and you're looking at the schools, and they're kicking these Marxists. They're bringing these kids in, and they're getting them to college. And by the way, the government took over all student loans. By using college, we can extend high school, so we can infantilize the kids. But what we do is we get them all to pay us to indoctrinate them and leave them with the bill when they come out and no jobs. So they have to work treadmill just to pay taxes and enter us into the controlled work environment that's supposed to make you miserable and keep you away from your family.
Entering the workforce in debt.
Yes. And when you understand that that's intentional, right? It's not, and you can't borrow from anyone but the government. And what's really interesting is the government themselves are working business partners with the universities, because since the government's paying for it, they know that they can guarantee the loans to the universities, which go into, I'm sure there's people obviously getting kickbacks from that, but they control the entire cycle of getting people into their propaganda system. That then reliably, the proof in the pudding is the conveyor belt of wackadoodles that come out. And once again, it's like they can believe what they want, but they've been trained. This whole generation's been trained to look at you as dehumanized, as you said, right? You're everything bad, right? You're not just one thing. You're a white supremacist, racist, Nazi, right? There's nowhere else they can go, so they have to jam them together. And then they use that to attack you, and all you're saying is like, look, right? Their efforts to dehumanize us, this is happening, and people refuse to see it because it seems so crazy. And what's even crazier about that is that they're the ones that are, insane, and they can be convinced, or it's temporary insane. Most people that don't know, and they're being used as pawns, right? But it's to break them away from being that pawn, and that's a difficult process.
Well, speaking of being crazy, we're in the final 8-minute stretch here. So I'm going to bring up your Twitter profile, or X profile now. And the article reads here, man arrested after allegedly taking a leg of a pedestrian after a train incident in Wasco. And they blurted out, thank goodness. But this guy, he looks like he might be transient or something, starts chewing on this leg. I mean, are we dealing with a mental health crisis? Are we dealing with a drug crisis? Is it a combination of everything? Like, when in the hell have we ever heard of somebody going up to a traffic accident, it's a train versus a pedestrian, and doing some wacky stuff like this, man?
Grabbing a leg, walking. Yeah, some of this stuff I shake my head at, because instead of reacting to it, and in the past, I would have just reacted to that and been like, oh my God. But now, as you learn to think about things from all sides, and I look at that, and yeah, we're supposed to react to it. And yeah, it's horrible, right? But I also believe there's an argument to be made that was part of intentional, elaborate, it's not a ruse, the movie, if you will, it's being directed all around us. Because how does that make you feel? When you see the horde of people that streamed across the border yesterday, that totally could have been legit, and it does show how bad it is. Well, never stop thinking about it. In my opinion, you think about it from different angles. If white hats did that and set that all up to happen, and basically false flagged it, but the intent and the impact is how that rushing of the fence and stuff makes us feel. And I think oftentimes that could well be the point, right? To think things, not instead of reacting directly to it, thinking about why things happen, and when they happen, how they affect you and how they impact you. Because people are afraid of seeing the border overrun, right? It's out of control, right? Our government isn't protecting us, right? These all then would feed back into realizing that severe actions ultimately have to be taken to protect us, because no one can disagree that that's a bad thing, right? And we've all seen it. And that's where I think the layer of psychological operations falls, that we don't know. And I'm not claiming to know one way or the other. I'm just making observations, and by doing that, I think doing that is the best way to reduce your stress and to think critically, because you'll look around and you're situationally aware right now, and you're paying attention, and you see people just reacting around you, and it's like everything slows down, right? Everything makes more sense, if that makes sense.
It does. And I like the way because I routinely make sure to tell myself and my audience, look at it. If it's white hat, why? If it's black hat, why? What are the different motives? What are the different ones? So you're prepared for it. So then let me pass this one up, and there's another one I want to. Here we go.
You go a few minutes over if you need.
So I appreciate it, brother. Thank you. So Brian Cates puts out this post, and it gets retweeted by Roger Stone. And the post that Brian Cates puts out there is, some people think I'm cray-cray when I say that the CIA, Mossad created Al-Qaeda and ISIS and used them to foment terror in the Middle East, that the Western powers then were forced to respond to with military actions. Trump told you years ago. And then he goes to a post that Fletch 17 had put out before him, Trump on ISIS. And then he quotes President Trump saying Hillary Clinton created ISIS with Obama, and then a hat tip there. And then Roger Stone, like I said, reposted this whole thread thing that's going on here. Your take on this one, man? Because this one made me smile.
Yeah, well, I think what you're seeing here, and I can't speak. Roger's kind of one of those funny guys. Him and Trump have been friends for like over 40 years. I think Trump likes him because he's kind of wily, kind of does his own thing. And he looks like the penguin, like a good guy version of the penguin, if you think of Batman. Wears these outlandish outfits and such. But yeah, I mean, when we're looking at, I'm trying to think here. I just lost my train of thought. 1 second. Go back if you could.
Yeah,
I have multiple 12 concussions in my life, so I have
no,
some issues with my short
I hear
term.
you made me laugh when you were like Roger Stone as the good guy penguin, because I've always Roger Stone's always with the way he dressed. I'm like, man, he reminds me of the Riddler.
Yeah. Well, so it's the same kind of thought. But I mean, you look at these people. So he reposts Kate's, and I always look at that like that's a way to assert something without directly asserting it, right? It's like being off the record. I think most people know. I mean, a lot of people try to figure out and try to portray, the deep state as being this or being. I think it's an amalgamation of all these different things that we see, and I see. And I don't really get too far into the Israel-Palestinian stuff. Obviously, eradicating people and children especially and all that is bad. I think everyone would agree. But I also see an intentional, pre-planned means as a fallback, as a force field to protect you. And so the enemy is clandestine. The enemy camouflages itself. The enemy creates illusions. They change the past around World War II, for example, and they change the past. They alter history and how we teach kids. We get rid of like critical thinking skills and such, and fill them full of pronouns and purple hair. And it's really amazing because it is intentional. And when we think about this, just the idea of Zionism. The idea that if you tax it, they had to change the truth about the Holocaust because they needed to have that as a sympathy blanket that they can always lean on. So they're not Jews, so to speak. They're just pretending to be because they're like a shapeshift. They just if you pretend to be something you're not, doesn't make you what you're pretending to be, right? You're fooling even people amongst your ranks, and that's one of the ways. See, Prussia has an interesting thing with Frederick Frederick the Third. What is his name? Anyway, he was an inherently evil person, And, he came up with the pickle factory, which is why the CIA is called the pickle factory, because this whole scheme of how to infiltrate and spycraft and stuff is Frederick the Great. And he said something to the effect of, countries have armies. This was Prussia before it was Germany, right? So it said Prussia on the map, and where to go. Prussia decided to be an army that owns countries. Flip the script. And so they're invisible, right? They're not seen. They own all the banks, right? They control everything from behind the scenes. And it's incredibly successful, unfortunately, for humanity, that they've been able to do what they've done. But, to me, I don't know what exactly that looks like. I can see the vague outline of this huge criminal conspiracy that spanned time. But getting into specifics, that's where, I can't claim to know things I don't know. I just know what that looks like. And I can recognize that it's there. And then we can help other people realize what we're up against.
One of the reasons this post made me smile is, and to reference the boards on here, the particular statement of we save Israel for last, and,
Right.
And I don't remember where I heard this first, and I've heard it several times. It's if you want to know who's in charge, who you're not allowed to talk about. And, depending how far back you go on the timeline, the Khazarians, whatever the case may be, it's one of those things where if you even try to mention something that's negative against Israel, you're right out of the gate, you're thrown anti-Semitic. In the ADL,
that's the plan.
100%. It's the plan to prevent you. And so I remember when I first heard about the Khazarians, and I went to research them, it was very hard to find information on them that wasn't like a debunking article to it. Like, I'm like, well, so many debunking articles. What were these people trying to debunk? Like, show me the articles that generated this opposition. And I couldn't find them because obviously they're being suppressed, or they're on page 900 and something of that Google search page. Right. And I finally came across this. Go ahead.
No, finish.
And so I finally came across this one journalist researcher guy, and I don't remember his name right off the hat, but this guy ends up getting arrested for putting this information out there, and he got attacked. And so, anyways, I ended up start researching some of the stuff that he put out there, which ended up leading me to another doctor. It's an American, and he's an Israeli American. And he had a bunch of peers. It's a typical, kind of like our, Dr. Mikovits and Sherry Tenbys, like doctors that were respected and in their careers up until they said something that's just not allowed. Well, this particular Israeli American doctor, and I have the link saved, so I'll drop it in the description if people want to read it. He comes out and he wants to research the blood history of the Jewish people, because his intentions are to find, the specific diseases that are prone to his people. He wants to see where all this is coming from to get ahead of it, to help people, for the medical benefit. But in the course of this, he starts to find that why are we having, blood ties to Yugoslavia and Ukraine and these other areas? And he starts realizing, like, we're not what they tell us we are. And he gets so much pushback to this, but the information he came and provided, which is science, right? Because that used to mean something, supports the quote unquote theory behind the Khazarians. And there's a whole show to put behind to explain that to people there. And so when I see stuff like this, being reposted by Roger, where, like you said, it's kind of that safe shot to do it because you didn't really type it, but you put it out there. It just kind of makes me feel like we're probably, and I know everybody hates timelines, but it just feels like we're in the fourth quarter of this fight, man.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And so one thing I do like, just thinking about it bigger picture, this took us centuries to get here, longer. This is going to take a while to fix things. And by fix, it's not going to come at once, because our education system was built to fail. I think it has to be replaced. The financial system. There's all these huge things that have to happen to kind of help society move past this terrible phase that we didn't even really realize that we were in, right. When I'm trying to think back, because you just mentioned something and I was trying to bring it full circle, and it's because you were just saying.
It was I was talking about people you're not allowed to talk about, and then I was talking about
yeah, that was it. And so, I mean, when you think about it from the standpoint of how do you preemptively put out defenses, right? You anticipate taking flak, so you put out defenses, earthworks, whatever, trenches. In this case, it's, what people think and how they perceive, and then you use them, because I believe that most Israelis, most Jews, are being used as human shields by the bad guys that are pretending to be one of them, because they've created a culture where they get all the sympathy for things that may or may not have happened, because they've massaged the historical truth. And that's why I think Israel was saved for last. And it's tied to the Rothschilds, obviously, who created it. And I think it's been a long-term plan. And we're seeing the fruits of it, that their success has been our failure. And they've been wildly successful. The tables are flipping, and I think everybody wants it to happen yesterday, right? We're all a Veruca Salt from Willy Wonka. I want it now. And ultimately, the difficult part is that once you realize you wake up that you got to the finish line early, not saying you know everything, but you realize that we're in this, but you still have to stay there and cheer everyone into the finish line yourself. And so there's the burden of waking up, but realizing that that's the opportunity, because that's where we add value as all this stuff unfolds. And it will ultimately, in my opinion, unfold more rapidly as it picks up momentum, and all time to this election, of course. And there's all these things that go into it, but it makes sense when you look at it through that lens. And so then you follow along with it and do your best to ascertain what's happening and communicate with other people about it. Do shows like this or posts, and we talk about it. And that's pretty much the best we can do, is through observation. But it's incredibly important, because you have to understand that everything that's being held against us is used as preemptive shields against criticism or attacks or money. And when you see the beast for what it is, right, it loses its power over you.
I'll tell you this, man. I've enjoyed the conversation, and I know the audience did as well. Awaken. So on X, your handle is at Awaken Outlaw. Where else can people find you if they want to hear more of the information you put out there?
Yeah, I'm also on Truth at the same handle. I do have other accounts on. Yeah, there's just not enough time in the day to keep. It's so hard to pay attention to the news because, and real quick, I'll say that we've got swept up in craziness, right? That we've become acclimated to insanity. That the news used to happen on occasion, but it's picked up now to where it's every 24 hours. It's something, there'll be something else as big as Moscow slaughter yesterday happening tomorrow. I mean, it's so much that I think we forget that we're in. May you live in interesting times is an old Chinese proverb, and we live in very interesting times. Whether good or bad is up to which side of things you're on, I suppose. But being aware of what's going on and situationally where to bring it around full circle is realize what we're in right now in this chaos, and realize that all of us have been normalized to it. And I think that's going to have some long-term effects. PTSD. Long-term anxiety from war with soldiers. I think we're dealing with a slow burn here. I think there's going to be a wave of PTSD-like symptoms later. But yeah, I mean, thinking outside the box and thinking larger than exactly what you're seeing up front allows you to be more aware, and that opens doors to other things, right? And I guess ultimately my point would be to introduce ideas and things, ask questions that help people have their own aha moment, right? You can't deprive them of that. They have to have it the same as you did, the same as I did, however that comes. And that's where we can add the most value, I think, is helping other people. And that in turn teaches us. It's like a self-perpetuating machine working against the deep state's interests.
Absolutely. Once you leave the ranks of the sheep to become the sheepdog, the sheepdog, your job is to continue to protect it.
Yeah, you check in, then you're stamping, and you show up and you're pushing truth.
A lot of O's in that one got me tongue twisted, man. Ladies and gentlemen, Awaken Outlaw. It is a crazy world when headline news in the morning is on page 3 by the time we lay our heads at night. So with that, you guys, this has been the Alpha Warrior Show. I'm your host, Alpha. Make sure you stick around. Support the sponsors that support this show. God bless and Semper Fi, everybody.
Welcome to the next generation of warfare, psychological warfare. In modern conflict, the mind is a potent weapon. Discover General Michael T. Flynn's groundbreaking guide, The Citizen's Guide to Fifth Generation Warfare. Unlock tactics, strategies, and the mindset to navigate this cognitive battlefield that we all find ourselves in. Equip yourself against manipulation and emerge unscathed. Unleash your potential. Order now.
Are you worried about the effects that higher inflation rates will have on your investments? Are you trying to secure your retirement savings against losses, but you notice that inflation is a hot topic these days? But how dangerous are low inflation rates on your retirement savings? An inflation rate of 2% may not seem like much, but it means that prices will just about quintuple over the lifetime of the average American. And 4% average inflation rate means that something that costs $1 when they're born will cost $23 when they die. That demonstrates the danger of even low inflation rates. So when it comes to gold and inflation rates, many investors want to know whether inflation rates have an effect on gold prices. What history indicates is that over the long term, increased inflation should lead to correspondingly higher gold prices. From September 1971 to August 2020, gold grew 7.5 times as much as inflation. Not only can an investment in physical gold help protect your assets against the damage done by inflation, it can also help grow the value of your retirement portfolio over the long term. If you're looking to protect your retirement assets, why wait until stock markets crash and gold begins to rise in price?